All right, so everybody, welcome. Today is Parenting Under Quarantine, question and answer discussion for parents of young children. And I guess that's kind of broad, young children. When Judy and I put this together, we really thought like 10 to 2, so the preschool elementary age. We're not touching, I think, infants, although we really could, right, Judy? That's an area. And I'm definitely touching teenagers. But Judy can touch the teenagers, but that's not really what we're focused on today. And we're going to do it in like a questions that we've heard or that were submitted, and then we're going to answer them. And there will certainly be time at the end for you to give your own questions. So I'm Raizel Keilson. I am the supervisor for the Early Childhood Mental Health Program, which is a part of Ohel's TICFA. TICFA is an outpatient mental health clinic in Brooklyn. I'm really passionate about doing work with parents. I think, they have such a huge impact on the children and on how children do. So I love working with family systems, with parents. Attachment theory really impacts my work, and certainly behavior modification. And I think both of those are really going to touch on today. And actually, Judy and I have been colleagues for quite a few years, so this is really fun to do this again together. Never did it like this, but to.
Right. Hi, everybody. My name is Judy Hulkower. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. My capacity at Ohel, in my capacity at Ohel, I serve as a clinical supervisor at Ohel Family Regional Clinic. That's in Far Rockaway, New York. We work with children, teens, couples, families, adults, parents. I am very passionate about working with parents. I do work with children as individuals, and in the context of their relationship with their parents, I work with parents. I do parent coaching and consultation. I also work with individual adults. And the parent-child relationship is just so integral. And I'm just so excited to be here with all of you at these incredibly unique and challenging times. Like Raizel said, we've been working together for years. We've never co-facilitated over a Zoom before. And we're actually able to see everybody that we're meeting with. So this is definitely different, but we are being flexible and adjusting to our current circumstances, which is probably one of the themes we'll be addressing tonight, right?
Yeah, definitely. All right, so here we're going to jump right into it.
Okay. So the first thing that I want everyone to think about is, how am I managing as a parent? I love this picture. Because you can interpret it however you want. Either this mom is doing a great job because she is managing, she's on the phone, maybe she's talking to somebody at work while she seems kind of calm, if you look at her facial expression with her kids on the floor. Some other people might look at this picture and think, oh my gosh, that household looks like it's out of control. So it's really a matter of our perspectives of how we look at things. And the first thing I want us to all think about is, how am I managing as a parent during this time where the challenges are pretty unique and unprecedented, right? We're home with our children. We're trying to manage and balance a much more intense situation than we typically would have been doing. So that's the first thing you want to think about. On that note, I love this quote. Perfectionism is, I know that there's some people who are calling in and not able to view the slides. So we're going to try our best to read the slides out loud for those people, okay? So right now we're looking at a slide that says the following quote: perfectionism is a dangerous state of mind in an imperfect world, right? The world is not a perfect place. So the idea of aiming to be the perfect parent or do everything perfectly in any given situation is just not realistic. It's not realistic ever, certainly not during these times. So we wanted to introduce that quote to start talking about the concept of good enough parenting. There was a famous Dr. Winnicott who coined this term. And the idea of good enough parenting is that parents, that's really what parenting is about. It's about doing a good enough job. And what he found was that moms of new babies would be especially intensely attentive to them every single second. They'd be any whimper, they would run to the baby and run to the baby. And what he started noticing was that it was healthy for the babies, for the parents, as the babies grew and developed, for the babies to have to wait a couple of seconds, right? And to build build up a little bit of that feeling of conflict. So, oh no, my needs are not being met in this very second, and then they learn to cope with that because it was resolved within a short amount of time. So the idea of good enough parenting is that we don't need to do a perfect job. In fact, there's no such thing as a perfect job. It's not warranted. It's not even recommended. We want to be attentive and responsive to our children, but in a reasonable, balanced way. Okay, that's the idea of good enough parenting. And I think that's a really, really important concept to integrate and think about, especially during this time when we're balancing more than ever before, right? I never would have accepted a full-time position at work if I knew I was also homeschooling my children full-time, right? How is that even possible? But somehow we have to kind of roll with it. So it's really helpful, I think, to think about the concept of not aiming for perfect, but aiming for good enough, and that'll actually help our children learn to cope when we're responsive enough, but we're not anxious about being responsive in a very intense way every single time. Okay, so it's a really important thing to think about. We're going to be thinking a lot about throughout our discussion tonight about adjusting our expectations to make them more realistic, more balanced for our current circumstances, and realistic. Okay, so Raizel, you want to answer that?
Yeah, one of the things we really want to think about tonight is the shoulds. And if you have a sentence that says, my children should be able to clean up after themselves, they should, recognize that the should usually comes when we have a expectation that's not being met, possibly an unrealistic expectation. So we're going to talk about different shoulds in some of the questions, but when you feel yourself saying, my children should stay in bed all night, my children should be eating healthier, those are things that are likely to increase your, it's not working right, and your head is, but this is how it should be, and then your tolerance is really quite low because you're really irritated. But as much as we can bridge the gap between our expectations and our reality, the difference between your expectations and reality, that difference is room for disappointment, irritability, so bridge that. So really accepting things for what they are, looking for ways you can change them, but not getting stuck in what you think, how it should be. All right, moving on to the next question. My 10-year-old son and my 7-year-old daughter are fighting all day. My home feels like a war zone. I wish they could learn to get along. Any tips? This is a question about siblings, and here I found a family circus which shows, can I have a friend? Hold on, sorry, this screams. Can I have a friend over? I don't have anyone to play with, and the little boy is surrounded by siblings. So it's sometimes siblings don't seem like a good option for fun and play. I'm sure people can, I imagine people can relate to that one, right? Being home all the time. So one of the quotes, one of the quotes that we found, and it wasn't directed to anyone, but we thought was so true. Siblings that say they never fight are definitely hiding something. So first, we want to just let you know, fighting is really, really normal. It's normal. It's also, I mean, you don't need to tell them this, but it's kind of healthy. It really is. It teaches you to negotiate conflict. It teaches you to give in. It teaches you what's worth fighting about. So fighting is normal, fighting is expected, and fighting is healthy, if we can say that, and people aren't going to yell and scream. But talking about fighting in the time of COVID-19. So the first thing is that I'm imagining for some people, you're seeing more of it. You know, it used to be maybe they were home for an hour together. Now they're home all day together. So definitely you might be seeing more of the fighting, and that's hard. It's hard to deal with it. I wanted to let you know that kids, you know, everyone is not at their best. I think we're all struggling for different reasons at different levels in different ways. But as adults, we like to think of adults having a bigger cup, right? We have a bigger cup to handle frustration that we can have. I'm worried about work. I'm worried about someone's health. I'm worried about my mother-in-law. And those things can pile into our cup, and we can sort of hold it and be okay. We like to think of children of having little cups. So they don't have room to hold all those frustrations. So even though they might not have the same level of stress and tension, and I certainly think preschoolers are less aware, let's say they're not preoccupied with what is COVID-19, they're certainly not preoccupied with finances, right, other big things, but they have a little cup, and that little cup is getting full. I don't get to see my friends. You know, I'm stuck at home trying to figure out how to entertain myself, right? So that cup's pretty full. So they don't have the best resources, like internal resources, to deal with the sibling who annoys them and to deal with conflict. So I think the expectation, not just that children will fight, but that there might be even more fighting because the kids are maybe a little bit more irritable. The situation is still a little hard for them. They're not used to having to negotiate being with their little sister all the time and sharing with her all the time. So to expect that it can be a little more tense, it can be a little bit more of a struggle for some kids, even before it wasn't. I also want to put out there that kids who really are never got along. This one, I think I was a 7 and 10-year-old. So you really want to think about, this is not the time to solve that. To say, hey, we're stuck at home, let's learn how to get along. These are not the two kids that I would set up and be like, let's hope they figure it out. I would think about, well, if this kid really needs space, and these two, if they're going to be set up doing something, it's going to end up in a fight, let's have them be doing separate activities. If you really wish your 7-year-old would be more tolerant of your 2-year-old, but she just can't take her in her room, then maybe make the effort to keep her out of the room. This is not the time to resolve sibling issues that have certainly existed before COVID-19. And I'm going to hand over to Judy. How do you intervene?
Okay. So the first thing, so this is a question that I get a lot, that we all both get a lot, is how do we handle sibling rivalry? And like Raizel said, this is not a new issue. Sibling rivalry is normative. It's a sign of a healthy, functional family when there's a reasonable amount of sibling rivalry, right? So the first thing I want to talk about is, before how to intervene, when do we actually intervene, and do we intervene with siblings? And the truth is, a lot of sibling rivalry is not something that we actually need to directly respond to in the moment. So if you have your two kids and they're struggling over who gets the who gets the milk first because it's at the table, or they're struggling over a toy or something, right? And we're not talking about 2-year-olds. We're talking about, let's say, school-age children, preschool to school-age children. So we're going to try to step back and actually let them kind of work it out on their own, right? How did any of us develop skills of conflict resolution? Hopefully, as we've grown into our adulthood, we've developed some skills to negotiate conflict, right? So that happens through actual practice, and that starts at home with siblings, that goes into school as well. So we don't always have to intervene. Oftentimes they will figure it out on their own, right? Or it'll just blow over on their own. Some exceptions to this rule, okay? So first of all, if there's a safety concern, okay, there's physical fighting going on, and somebody's physical integrity is actually at risk on some level, somebody might actually get hurt. Of course, the parent's first job, first and foremost, is safety, safety, safety. You intervene and you do what you need to do to make sure that everybody's safe. That's for physical safety. I'm going to say the same thing for emotional safety, okay? So if you have a child who is getting verbally abused by a sibling, okay, or emotionally abused, really the same thing, right? They're being name called. They might be at risk for a lower self-esteem, for a poor sense of self, because they're constantly being talked down to by the sibling, or made fun of, or teased. You can't tolerate that. You have to intervene. Okay. And the other thing you want to look out for, so again, we're talking about safety, both emotional and physical safety. If something's at risk, either emotionally or physically, you will intervene right away and set a clear limit that is not okay in this house. Okay. And we can talk about how in just a moment. I'm sorry. Okay. Another time when you're going to intervene is when there's a power differentiation between the siblings who are fighting. Sometimes you might look at this at an age difference. Okay, so if you have a 14-year-old who's constantly fighting with his 8-year-old brother, okay, that's kind of not a fair fight, right? They're in totally different levels. So you have to intervene and separate that usually. If you feel like the 8-year-old is being bullied, right? The difference between a bully and two friends who are in a fight is that there's a power difference. Sometimes it's due to age, sometimes it's due to size, right? You could have two kids who are similar ages, but one is much bigger than the other. So again, it's not a fair fight. It doesn't always have to do with chronological age. Sometimes it has to do with developmental age. So what that means is that you could have two siblings who you might even have a younger sibling who's developmentally in the normative range, and a 14-year-old older sibling who's developmentally delayed, and that that younger child actually could end up bullying the older child. So you want to look at, again, the power differentiation. If there's a more powerful sibling, and a less powerful one, be it age, development, for whatever the reason is, you want to intervene, because again, it's not a fair fight, and it's not realistic to think that it's going to resolve in a in a healthful sort of way. Okay, so that's when to intervene. Okay, so again, if you could look away and let them resolve it on their own, because it's a fair fight, it's not dangerous, it's no big deal, let it be. Don't give a lot of attention to it, just leave it. Okay, don't get involved. When do you intervene? When you have to, because there's a safety concern, and again, there's a power differentiation, and it's an unfair fight. Okay, now how are we going to intervene? So a famous psychologist once said that the world's stupidest question that a parent could ask his kids is, who started it? Okay, you're obviously going to get a different answer from both siblings. If you didn't see what happened, you're not going to necessarily know what the truth is. So the best thing to do if you don't know what happened and they're in a fight, you got two kids and they're both crying, or one of them's crying. You don't know who started it. You don't know who's really responsible. It takes two to tango. They're both responsible. So the best intervention that I would recommend in most cases where possible is to separate them. Okay, again, you don't have to get into the fight of he started, she started it. I don't know who started it, but right now, if you're fighting, you can't play with each other, separate them. You go play over there and you go play over there. That's one way to sort of just resolve it. You should also pay attention to, and I'm a parent as well. I forgot to say that when I introduced myself. Most and foremost, I'm a parent, thank God, I have some kids of different age ranges. And as a parent, I could relate to that triggering feeling when I see that somebody hurt my child, right? So if I see that there's two kids that got into a fight, I don't know, and it was a fair fight, they're the same age, it probably was, they were play fighting and somebody ended up getting hurt by accident or whatever, automatically my instinct might be to send the kid who's not crying to timeout. But for all I know, the kid who's crying is partially responsible for this, okay? So I really want to be careful about blaming a child when I did not see what happened. And I want to just, if I don't know what happens, I want to just separate them and not get into the whole discussion of who started it and who's at fault. I hope that makes some sense to people. The truth is, sibling rivalry is a whole big issue that we should probably have a separate hour to tackle. So I know we have some other topics to cover, but that was just, I guess, a broad sort of way to address it, okay?
Judy, you want to take this one?
Sure, okay, so we're looking at a slide that talks about Zoom school. I'm gonna raise my hand. Raise your hand if your anxiety is up because of Zoom school. Or telephone school, depending on where you live. Okay, mine is. Okay, Zoom, so this is what our question is that was submitted. Zoom school is a big stress for everyone, but my son won't even go on. It is a struggle every day to get him to join, and often he just shuts off the video or walks away. What can I do? I'm afraid he won't pass first grade.
So we wanted to first talk about, because I know we're talking like kind of in a broad sense, we wanted to talk about developmentally, there's a little bit of a difference for your preschooler. So that would be nursery, depending where you live, kindergarten, pre-1A, for some of you that's pre-K, different names, but that's really our 2 to 5-year-olds. The main goal in preschool is social emotional. They are going to learn to share, to follow rules, to negotiate. This can be done at home. And if this is a huge fight between you and the child doesn't want to be on, the child is not interested. Obviously, you're going to want to reach out to the school. I'm not speaking as your school as an educator. I'm speaking about it developmentally. It's okay. They can be taught at home, and they probably are, about sharing, about emotional regulation or dysregulation, about finding stuff to do, about building, about learning about their environment and the ways that we know preschoolers need to learn. That is the main task in preschool. So that is the preschoolers. This question was actually about a first grader. So let's talk a little bit about elementary, where you can't totally have your kid not be on, but it can be a really huge struggle. So I do want to put out there that through doing some of this work, certainly as a therapist, we've seen that for some children, this way of being, Zoom, which kind of projects your face up big, it can be really anxiety provoking, specifically for children who like to be not necessarily socially anxious. Certainly socially anxious kids, this might be a lot, but even kids who just like to not be the center of attention. They're more introverted, they're more shy. They're the kid taking the seat in the back corner. And now suddenly they say something and their face is projected across the whole screen. it does. And also they don't get, for the teacher, and this is certainly true for the phone too, the teacher can't read their nonverbal cues of kind of looking away or kind of shrinking down, which is kind of saying, Maura, don't call me, I don't know that. And for this kid, that can be so intimidating. So that might, if you know that that's your kid and this is a struggle, they can't do it, it might be a conversation to have with the teacher about possibly, I know some schools don't allow it, but maybe it's something to explore, having your child's screen turned off, minimizing it, talking about this with the teacher, having your child be called on when they're prepared. But it's certainly, this can be a big struggle. And the next thing we wanted to just jump in is we wanted to normalize it. You know, we're all sitting in our own home thinking, my kid is the one sitting with their feet up in the air, or my kid's the one who the phone is on in one corner of the room and they're playing Lego in the other. I want to tell you, I bet there's many people behind the screens right now nodding, saying, oh, she must be talking about my kid. Because it is so many kids. This is not a normal way. There's a reason why colleges have online schooling and elementaries don't. This is not a normal, developmentally appropriate way for children. And actually for many adults, for many people, this is not the way they learn. They need live interaction. They need a real human person in front of them. So wow, amazing that our teachers are doing this in our schools, that they have learned to kind of switch to this new format, but to also recognize that this is not just like, oh, well, my kid does fine in school, why can't they be okay here? This is new, this is developmentally inappropriate, this is hard, and this struggle is going on everywhere. I wanted to actually share that one of the class WhatsApp groups, you know, the one where you get text, is the teacher on? What's the passcode? Is there homework? Those that you sometimes think about leaving. I was on the other day and someone put on something about, you know, my daughter just can't seem to sit for the class. And right after, one mother after another, me too. And I think it's those moments where we can really, and this is what we're hoping to provide you right now in this moment, validation. You're not the only one. Your child is not the only one. There's nothing wrong with your child. There's nothing wrong with your home. This happens across the board. It is hard for children to learn in Zoom.
Yes. Yes, that has been my experience as well. Another suggestion, because school-age kids are actually moving ahead with the curriculum, at least in the schools that I've been interacting with, so there might be room to prioritize. For some kids, it's not the anxiety that makes it difficult. For most typically developed kids, again, this is not the normal way to learn. It's just hard to sit in front of this small little tablet screen for so long. It's just really, really hard. So if you find that your child is roaming around the house while he's on his tablet, and he's still paying attention, first of all, don't make a big deal. Like, let's talk about, again, flexibility and adjusting expectations. During the school year, he's expected to sit in his chair nicely with his feet on the ground. This is not school. Again, we want to set our kids up for success. Ideally, they should have a separate, like a workspace. They shouldn't be laying down on their bed during Zoom. But if you find your kid needs to walk around while he's paying attention to Zoom, go with it. I would just go with it. If you find that your kid is really not tolerating it, he's in tears because of all this Zoom. I can't do it, mommy. I just can't handle it anymore. You might want to pick up the phone or email or WhatsApp and speak to the teacher. And they might even, hopefully, if they're developmentally mindful, which I'm sure they are, they might make some suggestions of what he could possibly skip, right? They're probably going to tell you to prioritize the core skills types of courses, kind of like math and reading, as opposed to, you know, the fun science experiments, right? If he likes them, great, but you might want to start with the ones that are the core, part of the core curriculum that he really, really needs. Okay, so just try to collaborate with your teachers. I've had really positive experiences with the teachers I've worked with for my children and clients. I think everyone's understanding during this time, I hope. Right? A lot of our teachers are parents too. They see it. Okay.
Yes, absolutely. All right, so here's a fun one. This is the question. I know I am fortunate that I'm still employed during this quarantine. However, juggling my kids' school and my work is making me so stressed. I keep thinking either my kids will fail out of school or I will lose my job. How can I do both more successfully and at the same time? So work and kids. And actually, Judy and I were saying when we saw this picture, I love this picture because I think it's a fairy tale picture. Nobody is working, drinking their coffee, holding their kid, being able to work. So clearly, this is a very staged picture. For those of you on the phone, I'm sorry you can't see it. You can certainly reach out and we can email it to you so you can get a good laugh. That is not what working and being home with kids looks like. So when we talk about work and kids, I saw actually a really excellent article in the New York Times that spoke about we need to give ourselves permission for this to be a struggle, and that there isn't a quick solution. People know that we are home and that our children are home, that schools are canceled, that daycare is not available. And when we originally signed up for our job, and I know Judy mentioned this earlier, we didn't say, certainly I can do the job, but I'm also going to homeschool my kids, so they might be in and out. We took the job, for many of us, that we took the job when we left the house. And our children, whether they stayed home with a babysitter or they went out to school. So this whole thing is not what we ever contracted with our employer. But employers recognize that this is the new reality, and that children are going to have needs. Certainly the little ones are not independent and need to be cared for. And I think that we don't need to constantly be apologizing for this. If there's something really big and an important meeting, we could talk about strategizing for it. But otherwise, yeah, you need to take care of your kids. This is a worldwide struggle. It is not perfect. They absolutely, both work and home, are going to have needs at the exact same time. You cannot be in two places at once. So give yourself permission to not hit the perfect, to not say, but I should be performing, professionally at the same level, or I should be attentive to my children in a certain level that maybe you feel is appropriate. That's the shoulds. This is going to be hard. There are some days where I'm going to feel like I'm on target at work, but I'm not sure what happened with my kids, or I got the kids today. Oh, it wasn't great at work. It was a little awkward. I had to run out for, somebody needed the bathroom in the middle of a meeting. This, I just want to give you, and I'm speaking, certainly Judy and I are in that position right now. And we have our kids hidden away so that we could do this, but we know it's a real struggle, right?
That's right.
And to give yourself permission to not have it perfect. Oh, and I wanted to just add one more thing that I loved that I saw. It said, you are doing as parents the greatest service to mankind. You are raising the next generation. Do not be ashamed of that. Now, Judy, you want to give the practical advice. Now what should they do?
Okay, like Raizel said, yeah, I actually have a sign. I locked my door and I have a sign on my door that says, with a big stop sign that I will show you a slide later. I got the idea from a colleague of mine that says, like, please do not enter, to remind my kids that I'm in a meeting now. So some practical advice. So the first thing that, and this actually could be helpful for all types of parenting, which is setting ourselves and our kids up for success in general. This goes for sibling rivalry. This goes to training our kids not to interrupt us when we're in an important meeting. We do much better when we plan in advance, when we're proactive and not reactive, okay? So if I have no plans for my children and I have 4 hours of back-to-back meetings where I can't be interrupted, and I have no plan of how they're going to be, their needs are going to be met during that time, if they need help with something, and I have no plan, I'm probably going to set myself up for constant frustration as I get interrupted by all these, in all these important meetings. So the best thing I want to do is plan for it, right? So what can I do to plan for it? So the most obvious is trying to work my schedule, right? Let's try to if we have some flexibility in our scheduling, working our schedule out in a way that it makes sense around our kids' learning schedules, okay? That's the obvious, okay? The second thing is setting up a sort of routine and a schedule, right? Where kids know what to expect, okay? And setting them up for success where they won't need to interrupt you, right? So think about all of the things that they're constantly interrupting you about, right? I need a drink, I have nothing to eat, what should I do? And talk to them about it at a calm time, not during your work meeting that you don't want them interrupting. And start making a schedule or a list, okay? And for the younger children who are not necessarily good readers yet, you could do this using pictures and things like that. They could be involved in it, making a schedule. So that's one suggestion that works for some families. Some families will tell me that they hate anything to do with charts and schedules. It makes them very nervous. But even if it's not written out, figure out a way to communicate, to make a plan and communicate that plan, okay, to the kids. So that's one piece of practical advice. Do you want to show them that slide from our colleague?
Yes, sure.
That's great. Okay, I love this. Okay, so so we have a colleague who herself is in meetings all day. So this is obviously not for a preschooler. This is for a school-age child, but you can see how she clearly discussed this with her children first. Here's the plan. Mommy's going to be working. You're going to be Zoom schooling, and sometimes you're going to want to talk to me, but I'm in a meeting. So here's the plan. So she talked them through it, and then she made this sign on her door as a very, very friendly reminder. I love how friendly it is, right? Can you solve? And this is how it reads for those of you who are on the phone. It says, "How important is your question?" with an image of a stop sign. "Can you solve this problem yourself? If yes, amazing. I'm so proud of you," right? See that positive? If not, that's okay. Let's rate your question from 1 to 5. 1 is not so important and it can wait until I get an answer, right? And I can wait till I get an answer. 5 is very important and I must have an answer immediately. So then she gives different options. So for number 1, wait until mommy's break at 1 to 2 o'clock, right? Mommy's lunch break. If it's number 2, meaning it's not so urgent, again, wait until her break. Number 3, if it's really important, ask an older sister for help. If it's 4, if it's absolutely urgent, I need an answer absolutely immediately, only for mom, you're going to text mom your question. And then knock quietly and write your question on a piece of paper to show mom. So here's a mom who was very proactive. Okay, I'm guessing that she first experienced some disruptions and realized, whoa, I better make a plan here. And she came up with a plan that she discussed with her children first and put up a sign as a very friendly reminder. So again, it's not rejecting her children and saying, you're not my priority. It's just saying, mommy's working now. Can this wait? And by doing this, by the way, she's teaching them how to be less impulsive, right? If something could wait, it could wait. She's also teaching them problem solving skills, like what are my options? And oftentimes when we can't respond, again, going back to good enough parenting theory, when we don't respond right away to a child's immediate, urgent need, usually and often they're gonna resolve it on their own. By the time we get back to them, we gave them time to process their issue and problem, and there are lots of problems that they could answer themselves, right? Mommy, there's nothing to eat. That's like my favorite question. What should I eat? What should I eat? If I don't answer them, they're not going to starve. They're going to figure out that there might be something in my house that they could eat, right? Okay.
Yeah, and definitely teaches self-regulation, right? Like it feels urgent, but I can soothe myself and I can figure out what to do next.
Right.
All right, I'm handing this one to you, Judy.
Oh, great. Okay. So we're looking at a slide with a really fun, humorous image. It's a kid that's saying, Mom, can I set fire to my bed mattress? And mom's like, no, Calvin. Okay. So what do we do? So here's our question, okay? We're going to deal with the question is related to problematic behaviors, okay? So being home all the time with my 3 kids under age 7 has made me realize how hard it is to get them to listen. I feel like I say the same thing 100 times a day, and mostly I say no. How can I get them to listen? Okay, and again, this is not unique to COVID-19. We're just feeling it so much more strongly because we're home with them all day without a break. So like Raizel said before, their cups are getting full and so are ours. So we're all sort of, feeling it. Okay. So these are some broad, and again, this could be a whole class within itself. Raizel and I have given parenting classes that took 6 weeks to get all of these points across. So we're just going to give you sort of a broad approach and some concepts to think about. Okay. So the first thing that we want to do is set very clear family rules, right? The expectations of children's behavior should be very, very clear. Okay, Raizel, did you want to touch on this or?
Yeah, sure. When we talk about family rules, I think, especially with our preschool age, that 2, 3, 4, we think things are obvious. It's obvious that you shouldn't dip your sister's lollipop in the toilet. It's obvious that you should clean up after your toys. It's obvious that I don't appreciate when you throw toilet paper all over the room. But it's not always obvious to little kids. So what's best is to have a couple, and you're not going to be able to name all of them. I didn't know about you can't put lollipops in the toilet bowl until it happened. So stick with ones that are pretty basic, simple. Certainly for elementary would be the same. So what is important to you? I am not going to tell you what these rules will be because each family needs to decide, but it can't be too many. Nobody wants to live under martial law. You want to have things that are measurable and clear and important to you. And that's going to bring us into the next thing. So you and your spouse are going to decide what is important for us to get through this time. For someone, it might be, I need the toys to be picked up. It is so triggering for me to see a mess. I want at the end of the day, the toys picked up. So for COVID-19, there's a family rule. At the end of the day, everybody helps clean up. Now that rule is told to everyone and is something that you're going to spend energy on, which brings us to pick your battles. If you're going to choose to have a really long list of rules, whether they're in your head or you're saying them all the time, you will be exhausted. There's not enough energy to be addressing all the different things that go on right now in COVID-19 quarantine world of families, of parents. You can't get it all. It's not going to be perfect. So you're going to pick your battle. We can't tell you what that is, but you should internally look and say, is this worth it? Do I have the energy to deal with this? Is this the most important thing to my family? Is this really what our family rule is? If the answer is yes, this is very important. If I let this go, it will become a bigger issue. Or this is something that's beyond my boundaries of turning and looking the other way, and address. But if you're going to choose every little thing to say, wait, I don't want them talking back, and I don't want them throwing their shoes around, and I want them to do their homework right away, and I'm trying to think of all the things that, really are realistic. They're not crazy, but it's too much. And if you find you're just on edge, you're exhausted, your energy is spent, then maybe you're having too many battles. And you need to say, okay, I'm going to focus on this today. And that's what I'm going to choose to make an issue out of if it should come up. And I want to let you know that I think being home and kind of can highlight things that maybe we find troublesome in our child. Maybe you see a child who's more messy. Maybe you see a child you don't love the way they talk to their siblings. There will be time to address it after quarantine. This will end, and there will be time. So everything doesn't need to be fixed now. And like we mentioned earlier, we're all not at the best level, even though I definitely think, and Judy and I were talking about this is not the acute level. I think there has definitely been some adaptation to the new norm, and we don't even know how long this new norm is going to be. But as we're adapting and as things become more, things open up and things become more normal, we'll be able to address everything. By letting something slide doesn't mean you're giving up or you're saying it's okay. You're saying, I don't have the energy for this right now in this time. So that, and I'm going to hand over to Judy the next 2 points.
Sure. Okay. And there are lots of great, just adding to Raizel's point, there are a lot of great strategies like cooperation techniques and fun ways to get kids involved in things that you want them to do, like cleaning up. So even when you are picking the things that you're going to focus on, it doesn't even have to be battle. I just kind of want to do a little bit of a reframe there because things, when we want to get kids to do things like, I want you to clean up, I want you to do your homework, sometimes we can find ways to give them incentives to do it and not necessarily to respond punitively when they don't do it. So it doesn't always have to be negative. And on that note, when our kids are doing the right thing, we want to pay attention to that, and we want to focus on that and praise them and reinforce that. Right? Reinforcement is. I actually have a brother who has a dog, and I actually watched him train his dog, and it was a fascinating thing because in some ways there are some parts of parenting that are somewhat like training dogs, right? Because there's a behavioral element to it. I'm not comparing children to animals, but my point though is that that the way that we watch how animals are trained is very much it's very much about praise and reinforcement, right? So when you want to teach a dog a new trick by rolling over or something like that, every time they do what they move towards the direction that you want them to go, and he started to roll over, you throw them a bone or a dog treat. You throw them a dog treat. You right. So for parenting, we don't have to throw them candies every time, although some parents have been known to do that. But praise is great. It's a natural reinforcer that we want to be showering our kids with when they're actually doing the right thing. And the ironic thing is that for whatever reason, God seems to have made us that our brains are wired that we notice our kids more when they're doing the wrong thing rather than we're doing the positive thing, right? So if our kids are quietly, peacefully doing their homework and they're getting along, we're like, wow, it's great. Okay, I'm going to quickly go cook my dinner, wash my dishes, catch a quick email, right? They're finally being quiet. So I'm sort of like, I end up ignoring them sometimes when they're doing the right thing. And then they start fighting suddenly, and suddenly I'm right. What's going on? Who started it, right? So the irony is that we're giving them so much attention. Our instincts are to give them so much attention when they're doing the wrong thing rather than when they're doing the right thing. And what we want to do is retrain ourselves, which is so hard to do because, like I said, we're not wired this way, to pay attention when they're doing the positive. It's I sometimes when I work with parents, and I do work with parents who have very challenging children, exceptionally challenging children's behaviors that they need to manage. And sometimes I tell them, you need to think of yourself as like a treasure hunter. And you are searching, for a good thing to praise, tell me something positive about your child that you could praise, right? And for some parents, that takes a lot of work to even identify what could I possibly praise about my child, but there's always something. And for many of us, there's so much to praise. So as soon as they're doing something right, you praise it, and they're actually going to want to do it more. So you could teach them to do things like cleaning up in a very positive, non-battle sort of way, right? Every time your kid spontaneously cleans up after herself, you make a big deal. Wow, mommy didn't even ask you, and you did that all by yourself. I'm so proud. Wow. So there's so much that we could teach our kids and manage their behaviors through positive attention when they're doing the right thing. Okay, that brings me to, well, what do you do when they're doing the wrong thing? Similar to our question with the sibling rivalry, when do I intervene? Because sometimes when our kids are doing the wrong thing, it's best actually to not react and not respond. Again, not if it's a safety issue or a concern, but if a kid is, let's say, I don't know, making a negative face, like he didn't like what's for dinner, okay? You worked very hard on making a fancy gourmet chicken dinner, and your kid only eats hot dogs and he's making a face like, I'm not eating that, right? So you might feel very upset about that. I know I would feel a little bit like, hey, I just made a good dinner, right? That's kind of offensive or disrespectful. That might feel that way to me. But I might choose to ignore that. By paying attention to it, I'm actually giving him a lot of attention. Even though it's negative attention, it still reinforces the behavior, which might bring him to repeat it more. I might actually do something called planned ignoring, which I'm noticing it, but I am choosing not to respond. And that, again, goes back into choosing our battles. I'm choosing not to respond. And the truth is, if I don't respond, the behavior will probably resolve on its own. And sometimes by responding to negative behavior, I'm putting more attention to it. It actually might increase the behavior. Again, it's counterintuitive, but that's just how it works a lot of times. You want to talk about special time, Raizel?
Special time is, I think it actually comes from PCIT, but it's really a wonderful technique we use across a lot of our families and even in my own life. It's that we know that the increase in the positive attention, the attachment, the good times we have goes such a long way. And special time, what we prescribe it in, like, I guess the therapy world, but I think you can adapt it, is a couple minutes each night. Special time is not Disneyland, which I know is not available. Special time is just a couple minutes with each child. I mean, ideally it's child directed, so the child would really choose what they feel they want to do, and you're not really commenting on it. But if you're the type of person that you want to read a book or play a game, that is really fine. That is great. We just want to kind of highlight it because it's something that can help when it feels like there's so many behaviors. Here's something that has been shown to work. So really increasing that special time with each kid. All right, so we're going to move on to the next question. What do you suggest for a young child in the house with much older siblings or none at all? What should one do when they have no playmates in the house and a parent as a primary playmate is not working or possible? And what can be done with them when it rains, particularly on Shabbos? So Judy and I, we kind of titled this as boredom. What should we do with our bored kids? So here's the I have nothing to do issue. The first thing we want to look at was really talk about it because it is a little bit different depending on the age. And even though this case, I think, was talking a little bit about it in a child who doesn't have playmates, this can happen with kids who have twin siblings, right, Judy? You can have someone your age and still have nothing to do. So I'm gonna talk about it a little bit on the developmental ages. We're doing a large age group here. So 2 to 3 year olds are little people. They're bored. Probably you shouldn't leave them alone to figure out what to do. They'll probably pick something that could be unsafe or certainly something that you will possibly regret later, like pouring out your oil and slipping around the floor. Very fun, entertaining, really time consuming to clean up. So 2 to 3 year olds, we're talking about proximity. You're going to be nearby. You might engage them starting a toy, but they're even typically this age, they're good enough that if you're near and you're like, oh, look at the trains, and you're cooking and you're typing and you're talking on the phone even, they're okay. You're glancing, you're paying a little bit of attention, you're setting something up. They can really typically be entertained in that way. They're also good with too much stuff out. They're likely to make a mess. What's really helpful at that age is put some stuff away and take it out. So if you know it's going to be a rainy Shabbos, pull out a toy that hasn't been played with. You know, people always say, oh, what's the toy that a kid is going to play with? There is no magic toy. It's whatever's in someone else's house, right? It's new. New is the key to something a kid wants to play with. And that's frequently a mistake, right? We think, oh, they like that, I'm gonna buy it. And then, a week later, no one's looking at it. So this is the age where you can definitely put some things away, put some books away. It's a long Shabbos afternoon. You're not really able to get out. You pull out those books. It's new, it's exciting. You're nearby, possibly engaged, but if you're not the type of parent or you don't have the resources to do that, be with them, just being nearby can typically be enough for this age. Now moving up to our 4 or 5-year-olds. So that's like a preschool, pre-1A, kindergarten age. So this is an age where there's definitely a little bit more independence. Hopefully they recognize and they can recognize what would be really not okay. So they don't need that constant supervision, but they're definitely the kids you want to get started with an activity. So they're the ones that you're sitting down and starting to build the magnet tiles. You might start to sneak away, or you might pull a magazine while you're sitting there. You're going to set them up. They should be able to play independently. They get bored. You're moving them on to another activity. Let's talk about a little bit older, our 6 to 10-year-olds. So that's our elementary age. So the first thing is that being bored is actually healthy. It's good. The idea that children have to be constantly stimulated and engaged is a 21st century new idea, and it's not really consistent with what the research shows. It's good for someone to kind of sit and think, what can I do? What should I do? I don't have anything to do, and to innovate. So what I want to say first is don't make this your problem. This is not your issue. Your child doesn't, it could become your issue, and Judy's going to address that. But when it initially comes and the kid's, walking around like, I don't have anything to do, I'm so bored, and you just kind of ignore it. Let it be their problem. And if they, kind of whine at you, you can definitely turn and validate. I don't have anyone to play with, and oh, it's so hard. I know you really want to play with your friends and you miss them. I'm going to validate it. Yeah, it is annoying to be bored, and it's annoying to feel like you don't have anything to do. But I'm not necessarily going to solve it. And children, you would be surprised. Some of them really come up with amazing things that you never would have thought of to keep themselves busy. A friend of mine shared that her daughter, she would never thought of this as an activity. They have all the boxes because everyone's ordering, and she took a pen and she was like poking holes through the box and making designs. And that's how she entertained herself. Is that something mom would have come up with? Probably not. But she really had nothing to do, and she came up with that. So really let them be bored. Don't make it your problem, validate it, and you can assist with problem solving. And I'm going to hand that over to Judy.
Sure. What you just said reminded me of what we talked about earlier tonight about good enough parenting, right? Not being so anxious like that new mother with the newborn. I need to respond immediately. The newborn might need an immediate response. Your 6 to 10-year-olds could tolerate, we want to teach them that they could tolerate some boredom. They could tolerate some uncertainty about not knowing what the next activity of the day is going to be. But you're not responding immediately, right? Like a colleague with the sign on the door, she's giving her kids some time to possibly resolve their issue on their own. Sometimes you could even use praise to get their brain sort of working with problem solving. So you could empower them with the thing like, I don't know what you could do, honey, but you're so creative. I bet you're going to come up with a really cool idea that I never would have thought of, which is probably true. So, right. So you can kind of encourage them to get their creative minds and innovative minds working to find something to do. Okay. So what if your kid still can't find anything to do, and you have meetings coming up, and this is a daily occurrence, right? Let's say he ends school at 3, his Zoom classes, and from 3 to 5 you still have to work, or you just don't want to be constantly badgered by him about, mommy, I have nothing to do, right? So during a calm time, okay, not when he's in a angry or frustrated state of mind, and also not when you're in an angry and frustrated state of mind, you should plan with him. You can help him problem solve, right? So you tried letting him problem solve on his own, it's not working. So try to help him problem solve. And the way this is done is, you're not problem solving for him. You're not going to say, Shlomi, here's a list of the 5 things you should do when you're bored. Here. Say, Shlomi, I noticed that every day you're bored between 3 and 5 o'clock. What do you think? What do you think about us making a list together? And let's say he says, there's nothing to do in this house. I have nothing to start the list. The way we'd like to do problem solving with kids is, again, generating ideas and then choosing which ones are realistic and most possible, okay? And most helpful. So if he comes up with nothing, you could start with a ludicrous idea. Well, I have an idea. Why don't you be an astronaut for the day and go to the moon? Mommy, we're in quarantine. I can't go to the moon. Oh yeah, I forgot. Okay, use humor. I love using humor with kids. Actually, when my kids are bored, I'll tell you what I do. I say, would you like me to stand up and dance on the table for you? And they roll their eyes and they walk away. So I use humor to just get them away. It works almost every time. Okay, but when they roll their eyes at me because they heard that silly joke, we move on to problem solving, again, at a calm time when we're both not frustrated, right? And if they say, Mommy, we can't go to the moon, we're in quarantine, and I'm not even a licensed astronaut, okay, well, then you come up with something. I can't seem to think of anything normal. And you'll see, they'll come up with some ideas, okay? And again, that goes again to our earlier question regarding balancing, homeschooling and kids at home and work. You want to plan ahead, okay? And that goes to what I just spoke about, okay? That planning ahead is you not having that meeting with the child while he's frustrated and angry and in tears that we have no choice in this house and nothing to do, and it's not fair. You're having it like at a calm time when nobody's frustrated. That's when we plan ahead, okay? Being proactive, not reactive.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
I think this one's yours.
Okay, so our next slide reads the following. How do I maintain a happy atmosphere at home while being in quarantine? Okay, so the first thing we want to really think about is with all the struggles that we talked about, how are we going to manage our kids at home for so long? How are we going to entertain them? How are we going to make sure that they're doing all their math homework? How are we going to work and entertain them? All this stress. The first thing we really want to do is look at the whole child, right? How are our kids going to walk away from this experience? How are we as a family going to walk around from experience, right? Right, the slide that I'm looking at reads as follows. History will remember the pandemic, the quarantine, the politics, and economic struggle. Your children will remember the family time, the laughter, or the stress and the fights. So we want to be mindful of the memories that we create with our children during this time. So the first part to doing that is taking our own temperature first, right? Noticing, how am I doing? Okay, not just as a parent, how am I doing with everything going on? Because if I'm coping well, if I have inner resources and I'm able to access other resources that I need, if I need extra help, and I'm managing well, the greatest likelihood is that my kids will be fine too, okay? But kids are very sensitive to how their parents are doing. If the parents are stressed, and a lot of us are stressed for so many reasons, they're gonna pick up on that too. So we wanna access our inner resources and access the support from the outside if needed to make sure that we're doing okay. Okay, if we're doing okay, that's the best thing that we can do for our children is managing our own needs, our own self-care, okay, while balancing all of our family's needs, okay? So in order to do that, we need to create a quarantine filter, which is sort of what we talked about this whole time. Don't aim for perfection. Maybe the dinners won't be as extravagant. Maybe it will. Maybe it'll be more extravagant because your homework, I don't know. Maybe your house won't be as neat or whatever, right? But we're not aiming, maybe you won't be as calm with your children all the time. That's all okay. We're not aiming for perfect. We're aiming for good enough, okay? And just by the fact that that all of you are here tells me a lot. You're probably doing more than good enough, because to take the time out of your busy schedules to be here with us today, just to talk about how can I be a more mindful parent and do the best by my child, really just says so much. So I really want to thank you for being here. Should we open up for questions? I see that we're running low on time. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Let's do that. So we want to invite you to share. So I want to remind you, there's actually two ways that you can share questions. One is you can chat it to either Judy or myself or the group. The other option is you can actually unmute yourself and ask a question. Can people unmute themselves? I hope that's I'm
not noticing. If somebody's having trouble unmuting themselves, please chat me. Okay, I see somebody. Okay, somebody asked a great question. Okay, somebody asked the following. You mentioned about putting, hold on. 1 second, sorry, it just clicked off. Okay, here we go. You mentioned about putting toys aside so they seem new and exciting. Another idea is to trade a box of toys and books with a friend if you're comfortable doing that. Oh, I love that idea. Okay, that's such a great idea. If you're comfortable doing that with quarantine, if you feel safe doing so, another idea is that you could trade friends and books with a friend so that your kids actually do have new toys. You trade. I actually did that with a family member. We traded books for our children before the Passover holiday. And it was amazing because we couldn't buy we usually buy new books before the holiday, go to the library. There are no libraries to go to. Bookstores aren't open. So that was actually a great idea. Thank you for that tip. We're really loving the tips. Anybody else have good tips, questions?
This is new. I see a question though about what should I tell a 3-year-old when they go to a friend's house or park. So I guess this is as people are coming out of quarantine, and I can't speak to the medical guidelines, but I will tell you, 3-year-olds don't know what 6 feet apart is. And if it's going to be a tight, so I'm going to tell you to think about it developmentally. I'm not talking about this from a medical perspective. 3-year-olds are not going to know what 6 feet apart. And if you're going to go somewhere and the whole time it's going to be, don't do this, don't touch, don't do this, it's not going to be pleasant. So you really want to go and think, is my child going to be capable of understanding and following the rules? So maybe they could keep on a mask if your child's the type that can't. And again, I'm not saying that that's what they have to do, but if that would be what they have to do, you might want to reconsider. It's really, we want to set our children up in a way that they can do what we're asking them. And I definitely think there are things that we can ask them to do, but they can't do. And this is really new. There's no guidelines on, what size masks, kids are used to masks from 4 and up. We really don't know. I think a lot of kids, that's hard. Certainly 6 feet is going to be really hard. So if you're going to do it, think about if the rules you need to set are things that your child can really follow. If not, you might want to reconsider.
Okay, I'm reading another question. Okay. Oh, wow. We have so many great questions and recommendations and tips. Okay. I don't know how much we'll get to, but we're going to try to get to as many as we can. Okay. Somebody asked the following: what are good ways to get a 2-year-old to clean up after they play with a toy? Do you want me to take this one or do you want to try, Raizel?
Yeah. I mean, again, what's your expectations? What you said, I love that you say, after they played with a toy, because that's the first thing. The 2-year-old is not going to come to a big room where they took out everything and be able to figure out where things are going. Developmentally, that would be an age where I am literally parallel doing it, right? So I'm like, the blocks go in this bin, come on, and they're throwing it in. And then we're moving on to the next thing, and we're doing it together. As children get older, they should be able to do it without the parallel, but a 2-year-old's developmental stage is that it's more of a mirroring. So I'm doing it, and I'm in a playful way inviting them to do it. I don't know if you want to add to that, Judy. Am I missing an other?
Okay, no, that was great. I'm just as you were talking, I'm just looking at some of our other questions. Here is a question. I'm going to read the question out loud. I'm assuming that if people are chatting it, they're okay with us reading it out loud. Obviously, you do remain anonymous. Again, if you want to shout out your questions and not be anonymous, please unmute yourselves. Okay, so here's a question. I have I'm going to leave some details out. I have 2.5-year-old and a 1-year-old. I work from home in the medical field, and I have to take care of them while sometimes being on the phone with patients, and that can get stressful. Wow. Okay. Yes, I'm feeling stressed right now just reading this question. You're 2.5 and 1-year-olds, you're in your medical profession, and you have to watch them while you are with your patients at the same time. Your 2.5-year-old, she's describing her 2.5-year-old. She behaves so well with my in-laws. But with me, she's stubborn and fights and has tantrums. There's only so much energy I have to deal with her, and I do want to do the best I could so that she grows up and learns from it, and it shouldn't affect her self-esteem in the long run, if that makes sense. At some point, I lose it and yell, and I hate that. Don't want negativity. Wow. Okay, so I'm so, thank you for whoever out there asked that question. That was a really courageous question to ask. One of the issues that Raizel and I did not really talk so much about, which is a theme that I talk to parents a lot, which is that sometimes we know exactly what to do as a parent. I know I shouldn't yell, it could affect my kid's self-esteem. I know I shouldn't, I know, but I do it anyway. And that's because I'm a human being and it's too much for me, right? You're a doctor and you're on the phone with your patient and you have 2 toddlers that you're watching on your own when you didn't sign up for your job without daycare, right? This was not the plan. So you feel like you're going to lose it, or you do lose it at them sometimes, and then you feel bad about that. So again, when we talked about towards the end of our presentation, taking your own temperature, how am I coping? The first step is acknowledging I'm not coping as well as I'd like to be coping. And then that's when we talk about what inner resources do I have to calm down and regulate myself. And when I notice I'm not regulating, what could I do to regulate myself so that I don't come to do something that I know I probably would be better off not doing. It's better for me not to be yelling at my 2-year-old, right? It's normal for 2.5-year-old to tantrum. But the problem is I'm on the phone with a patient and I can't hear, and this sounds unprofessional. It stresses me out so much, so I yell, right? So the first thing you want to do is take your own temperature. How am I doing? I'm not coping well. What are my resources that I have available to me to help? Okay, so the first thing is setting up for success. Is there any sort of practical way that you don't need to be watching your 2 toddlers while you're working with your patients? Because that does not sound like a practical situation to be in. Is there anything that does that, for some people might mean cutting back hours from work if they have flexibility. For some people that means getting a family member to watch the kids, which I know in quarantine is difficult. If there's a spouse who's possibly available, for example. And the other thing to think about is that's for external resources. And then if the other thing to also think about is my internal resources, and that's what is available to me to regulate. And that's when I would talk about mindfulness, slow breathing. Take a deep breath when you notice your body starting to get very, very stressed. Take a very deep breath and tell yourself, I can handle this, even though your body's telling you, you are not handling this, okay? So that's positive self-talk. I can handle it. You're sort of cheering yourself on, taking a deep breath to regulate yourself. And if you're about to lose it at your kid, I'm about to yell, I feel it coming, I'm about to lose it. Better, as long as your kid is physically safe, walk away from the room and take your deep breaths in the next room, okay? So that's a very, very short answer to a very difficult question. I don't know if that fully addresses, fully resolves your issue. It probably doesn't, but I hope maybe some of that might be somewhat helpful. Okay.
We have a couple. Someone here is asking about a child who has a underlying issue that's getting worse. It sounds like a fear of dying. So maybe an 8-year-old who already has pre-existing anxiety and it's getting worse during COVID-19. What we will tell you is that most children are not going to develop anxiety from being in this situation. They'll have fears, but if we really keep it to developmentally appropriate responses, which I believe other Ohel, I wish I could tell you exactly which one, but some of the other Ohel videos did address how to deal with it with children, then it won't be worse. But if a child has an underlying anxiety or other ADHD issues, it's possible it will flare up, and this is certainly true with adult. Any mental health struggles you might have certainly can flare up, and I would advise reaching out to providers that helped you previously, and also developing realistic, expectations. So if this child's being triggered a lot because they're hearing possibly the news, then I would really try to limit. I mean, this is great for all children, but especially children that are more anxious. Don't let them be exposed to the news. Don't let them be exposed, if possible, to funerals in the community or deaths that they don't need. Someone they don't really know. That would be one way to deal with that. But certainly if it's more of a bigger issue, you should reach out. Actually, Ohel is open and we are doing telemental health, which is sort of like what we're doing, Judy and I now, but of course not with many people there. It is through Zoom or other platforms, and we do provide therapy. And I know people are calling from all over the country, so we really provide this service in New York. However, there are many places, I believe, that have moved to telehealth platforms. So if you do feel like you need support, please don't see COVID as a reason not to get support. Please reach out, whether Ohel or any other agency. And you can even actually call Ohel if you need help finding something in other areas, the Ohel access. I see, Judy, I don't know if you have, there's another question about.
I have a lot of questions, go ahead, yeah.
So I think we're gonna try to end, what time, like 10:15, just to be mindful of the schedule, but we really appreciate the feedback.
Okay.
Yeah, we could.
I just want to say we're so sorry. I see some amazing questions, and I'm really so sorry that that we didn't have enough time to get to everybody's questions. I just want to reiterate what Raizel said, that we also have. Did you talk about the crisis counselor?
Oh, no, please, no.
So could you talk about that? Because we have some resources for people. Go ahead, Raizel. Why don't you explain that service?
Yes, Ohel has also the Ohel. I'm so sorry. We should have the name. The Zoom. They have like a therapy COVID-19 TheraZoom. It's not a group setting. It's where you just come into a virtual waiting room and you're assigned to a therapist to talk about COVID-19 related
Stressors.
issues. It's about, I think it's, the sessions are about 15 minutes. But certainly if you need more information, please call Ohel. The number's on the website. They can let you know. So this could be like, I don't think I need I don't know if I need like ongoing treatment, but I have something I really want to address personally. Please feel free to reach out. There are excellent therapists on there, really talented in both crisis work and just ongoing regular work. So please, if you feel you need more support, reach out to that.
Please reach out. Thank you all for joining. Have a great night.
Yes, thank you. And please, there are other Ohel TheraZoom opportunities, so please take a look at the website. And we really appreciate you all. Like Judy said, you took the time, so you're already ahead of the game. And everyone should stay well and be healthy. And good luck.
Yes, good luck to us all. Take care, everybody. Be well. Bye-bye.